Final Fantasy series has produced some of the greatest role-playing games on Earth, but if you stick around for long enough, even the most inspiring entities are bound to fall on hard times. To maintain its relevancy, Final Fantasy has had to evolve and take risks. And sometimes, those risks prove too great. We decided to stick to the games that actually included the words Final Fantasy in their title, so trash like Chocobo Racing isn't worth mentioning here. No Ultima spell can ever annihilate the following games from existence, and no Phoenix Down can ever revive them to their full strength.
Green Wrath is awoken. Spirit comes.
Number 10. Final Fantasy XIII.
Many of the games on this list are bad or broken in various ways, but none are as disappointing as Final Fantasy XIII. After an impressive reveal trailer at E3 2006, North American fans waited nearly 4 years to play Final Fantasy in high definition. Their patience was rewarded with an absurdly linear game that still spits out tutorials after a dozen hours of play. Twisting the knife even further are obnoxious characters like the painfully enthusiastic Snow and Vanille, a high-pitched dimwit we never need to hear again. Final Fantasy XIII isn't a paradigm shift at all, just a bad game. It received a great score from GT upon release, but the game has no defenders among the current staff.
Man. Chocobo, we just can't catch a break, can we?
Number 9. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: Echoes of Time.
Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Echoes of Time has a fatal flaw. The AI possesses a stupidity so pure it cannot exist in the real world. Computer-controlled companions don't help with puzzles, they don't follow the player, and they don't know falling can kill them. Objectives are forgotten, replaced by infinite suicide. We'd blame them for ruining the game, except for all the other fatal flaws: text-only communication for multiplayer, inadvertently creepy cutscenes, and an isometric perspective that makes every jump a leap of misguided faith. Perhaps the suicidal AI is just looking for a way out of the game.
Number 8. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest.
In 1992, Square feared the Final Fantasy series might be too difficult for Western audiences, so they released Mystic Quest, which was exclusive to the US and Europe for almost a full year. The game's soundtrack is the only thing worth salvaging from the experience. The story is painfully basic, and the inventory is the smallest of any console Final Fantasy. Random enemy encounters are absent, enemies stand around waiting to get hit, and typical combat options are stripped and simplified. It tried to be known as the Final Fantasy that brought the great gaming markets together, but instead was labeled as one of the franchise's black sheep.
Number 7. Final Fantasy Fables: Chocobo's Dungeon.
Putting you directly in the feathers of a combat-ready chocobo isn't a terrible idea, even if you aren't a fan of this plush, wide-eyed variant, but the Wii version of Chocobo's Dungeon feels like it didn't spend enough time in the incubator. While the opening scenes promise a bright and colorful future, the reality is that you spend most of the game in dull, brown dungeons. Rather than offering expanding variety, the random levels are a practice in tedium and repetition, encouraging routine over strategy. Overall, the monotony of Chocobo's Dungeon overwhelms its charms.
Chocobo, stop distorting the future.
Number 6. Final Fantasy Legend.
This Legend is a case of mistaken identity. The four-color fledgling known as the Game Boy had its very own Final Fantasy, but Legend is a saga game, the first in fact, rechristened stateside. While it boasted a few standout features like having monsters in your party and distinctive worlds canopied throughout a sprawling tower that pierces the sky, the overall effect was anemic at best, and more often than not just a blend of bland, grindy, unnecessarily punishing, and difficult gameplay. Even for the time period.
Number 5. Final Fantasy II.
The original Final Fantasy is considered a landmark moment for Japanese role-playing games. Its sequel isn't. Final Fantasy II is a failed experiment that attempted to transform the leveling system of the first game. Yet instead of being revolutionary, it led to ridiculous situations like attacking your own party members to increase their hit points. Sometimes, flexibility is less important than efficiency, and Final Fantasy II's unbalanced monotony is something we never want to experience again.
Number 4. Dirge of Cerberus: Final Fantasy VII.
Maybe Vincent Valentine should have just crawled back into the coffin he came out of after wrapping up his turn-based battling duties in Final Fantasy VII. This deeply flawed action RPG spin-off is almost as awkward as having a metal claw for an arm, and even more embarrassing. Squeenix made extensive gameplay tweaks to the game before releasing it in North America, but apparently you just can't polish a Turk. The game was such a crime that it's no wonder this brooding loner's career got the death penalty. Sorry, Vincent, buddy, but it looks like the dirge tolls for thee.
Number 3. Final Fantasy IV: The After Years.
Though Final Fantasy VI often gets the label as the best 2D Final Fantasy, 4 typically nips at its heels. So when Square Enix announced a sequel to one of the 2D installments, many of us got excited. Then reality set in on this dubious fantasy, with a plot that reads like bad fanfiction, poorly designed areas, and a soulless quest that relies too hard on nostalgia. We'll stick by our stance that The After Years is merely an afterthought. What's worse is that originally it was released in episodic format, angering fans who simply wanted to purchase the entire game immediately. It's best to pretend this sequel never happened.
Number 2. Final Fantasy XIV.
Final Fantasy XI is Square Enix's most profitable Final Fantasy game and has held a sizable player base for over a decade. Next to maybe WoW and EverQuest, it's arguably one of the most successful MMOs of all time. So when Final Fantasy XIV arrived on the scene, we had high hopes for XI's successor. What we got was not only one of the worst MMO experiences of all time, but one of the worst games, period. Despite extensive beta testing and the top talent that made Final Fantasy XI a success, early adopters endured a poorly designed experience that even the staunchest of fans couldn't stomach. At least Square Enix managed to turn it around with A Realm Reborn. Otherwise, this could have gone down as one of the most spectacular failures in Final Fantasy history.
Number 1. Final Fantasy All the Bravest.
Final Fantasy All the Bravest is just the worst. It's a disgusting turd of a game, slathered in fan service sauce. Shame on you, Square Enix, for rehashing our favorite sprites and music, preying on our emotional nostalgia, and lecherously eyeing the gill in our pockets. All the Bravest isn't a game, it's an app designed to extract all the money possible from Final Fantasy fans who own Apple products. You like Cloud? You can try to buy him, maybe. You never know because all character purchases are random. You'll probably end up with the dumb pig from Final Fantasy IV. Beyond being dazzled by some epileptic flashing lights disguised as gameplay, and being required to furiously flap our fingers over the screen like a drunken guitar player, All the Bravest is really just a lobotomized experience that tugs at memories reflected in our favorite Final Fantasy characters. Don't tarnish those memories, Square. They may be all some of us have left.